everyone, and welcome back to our Term of the Week series. I'm Mike Hopper. I'm here with Dave, Jamie, and Jason. Jason, what do you got queued up this week? What do we get to learn?
Welcome back to our weekly segment, the Real Estate Term of the Week. Week. Today we're talking earnest money. So what exactly is earnest money? Well, let me explain. Earnest money is a deposit made by a buyer to show that they're serious about purchasing a property. It's a way for a buyer to demonstrate their commitment, show good faith, that they're going to go through the transaction and secure the property while they work through the process of obtaining financing or doing their home inspections. The amount of the earnest money can vary. In our market here in Columbus, what we normally see is around $1,000. When you get into doing a new build or more traditional real estate investing, I typically see 1% earnest money deposits. The one trick of the trade here locally is keep it underneath the small claims court amount limit. I think Franklin County is like 5,000 or 6,000 now. So we try and keep it underneath that amount. But typically in Columbus, you put $1,000 deposit in there. It's pretty customary and it's going to slide right through. That money is held in a trust account, and the reason why it's held there is that it needs to be non-interest bearing. No one's making money off of this deposit, and it's to be kept separate from other funds. And so it sits in the trust account. And the reason why it's important is that it's going to give the seller some kind of peace of mind that the buyer is serious about buying the property. They're less likely to back out of the deal when there's $1,000 or $2,000 skin in the game. And so additionally, if the buyer does back out and it's for reasons that are outside of the contract terms, then they're typically not going to be able to get their deposit back quite so easily. Buyers, if their financing isn't secured, if the inspections go left to center, they're going to be able to keep that deposit. But if the buyer walks away for a reason outside of the contract and is just in breach, then the seller is going to be able to make a claim for that deposit. And this is, again, why you want to keep it under the small claims court limit amount. It's much easier to go to small claims court and make that claim to get your deposit back from a seller or for the seller to get it from a buyer than it is to go into, big boy court. And we're talking about, a $15,000 deposit. And so the seller's looking basically to keep it as compensation for their time and their expense being off the market. I recently had a deal here just about a week or so ago where the buyer came in, made a nice offer above asking price, and my seller was going to sign it, but there was $0 in earnest money. And so we ended up, going back and forth with the buyer. And in the meantime of the back and forth, another offer for more money came in. And so because that buyer number one didn't offer any earnest money, they ended up losing the house they wanted altogether.
Yep.
And so it's an important part of the transaction. It serves as a symbol of the buyer's commitment, and it provides protection both to the buyer and to the seller. And so that's it for this week's Term of the Week. Join us next week for another informative and scholastic segment.
I'd like to add one thing and maybe clarify just a little bit that if there is a breakdown of the purchase contract, that both the buyer and the seller have to agree who gets the money. The purchase contract here in Columbus, as Jay mentioned, there's a number of ways that the buyer can request the money back if their financing falls through, or as Jay said, the home inspection reveals a lot of problems that the seller's not willing to address. But just because those things are in the purchase contract doesn't automatically mean the buyer's going to get their money back. They still have to submit what's known as a mutual release. Buyer, seller, buyer agent, listing agent all sign that here's who's going to get the money. And if they don't, if the buyer and seller don't, then that's where you end up in court. and typically small claims for $1,000 or less. So anyways, just
Well, then just for the information, or what happens if the buyer and seller don't come to an agreement and the money sits? Isn't there a time frame on that?
2
2
years.
years. Sits in
2
the trust
years.
account for 2 years and then is returned to the state's unclaimed funds division.
Okay.
Right. And then at that point, the buyer can make a claim on the money and most likely get their money back. But it'll sit there for 2 years and not do anything. So kind of an interesting thing. I tell people the best way to think about this is that if you go out onto the freeway and the speed limit is 70, but old Dave Barlow says, "Hey, Mike, you can go 85." And you get pulled over and you tell the police officer, "Hey, Dave Barlow told me I could go 85. It's like, no, the law says you can only go 70. And same thing here. Yeah, the purchase contract says I should get my money back, but state law says both buyer and seller have to agree who gets the money. And so anyways, so all right, Jay, I appreciate that. Thanks.
Thanks, Jay.
You're welcome.